Yeah, just more than anything, a quick comment on the census that is taking place. You might all remember that the past governor, about 2 years ago, I think it was pushing local businesses and trying to get their non-Phuket resident employees to register. I have a business, I have about 30 employees. I tried to do that. The problem was that I found out was, of course, these Thai employees of mine that are Isan or from outside of Phuket, when they tried to go to their landlord to get their Tamian bond transferred to this Tamian bond, they met a lot of resistance. And most of the landlords were worried about tax implications. Obviously, they were not claiming that as income tax, the rental on these apartments and things. So it was a big hassle. The other point I wanted to make was Martin said that there's not many Brits that are registered here with the embassy. Is that because of why? And maybe some reasons they wouldn't want to register. And is that typical of the other honorary consuls you talk to, that a lot of the foreigners don't register with their embassy here?
Okay, let's do that one first. British people are encouraged to register with their embassy, whether they're coming here on holiday or whether they're living here more permanently. The whole system of registration is called locate. And one of the main reasons, or some of the main reasons why we want people to register is purely so that they can be located. During any given year, we would have in Thailand itself, myself, I probably would deal with somewhere between 6 and 10 per year of families looking for people who they last heard they were in Phuket, living in such and such a place. That's just in Phuket. All over the country, we would probably have somewhere in the region of 60 to 80 of such inquiries every year. Let's go back to the tsunami of 2004, where there are a lot of British people living here, a lot of people on holiday. And the biggest comment from people living in Phuket after 3 or 4 days or 5 days, hey, you have not called us yet, you've not told us what to do. Well, the embassy had no idea that you were there. Oh yeah, but I registered with, I've got a visa. The Thai authorities, and it's all down to your private, what do they call it, personal private database, your personal data cannot be handed on to anybody else. So let's go to the census. And I enjoy reading some of the online comments. And the first one was with the census. Well, surely immigration will pass the information on. Immigration Department of Thailand have no authority to pass on your information to the census board. It's a totally different body that's set up in Thailand to deal with this. And it's down to your privacy. And so why do people not register with the embassy? They think, oh, I'm not going to tell them where I am. Well, okay, fine. We're trying our very best for you, and we're trying our very best for you and your family. And if there is any possible situation of an issue that comes up in Thailand, whether it be politically driven or whatever else, and believe you me, when the problems were going on in May, there were many, many embassies in Bangkok that were putting together evacuation plans. Nobody knows about it, but they've got to put together the plan just in case. If they don't put a plan together, then for sure it's all over the first page of the Sun or the Daily Mail or the Express or the Guardian. Those are the 4 favourite newspapers for independent writers in Thailand to get through to them. So there were provisions were in place by many embassies. What do we do if something like that is going to happen? If you are registered, you would be the first person to be contacted. You would be on that first registration. We would ask for your telephone number. You would get a text message from Thailand that they will press the message. Bang! This is what to do. If you're not registered, you're not going to get it. But some people say, I don't want to register because, oh, no, what am I going to pay tax? Well, okay, maybe you're in a special bracket, so you don't need to register. But then, if there is a problem, don't expect to get the first phone call. So, you know, that's it. We're purely there as a form of assistance. And if we can assist people at first hand, it makes everybody's job working within the embassy and the consular department much easier. So, you know, the census, I don't know, there's only a certain amount of questions that you have to answer on the census. And it's purely, where are you living, if you're living here for any length of time. I don't think you need housing papers and all that sort of thing, but I'm not an expert on the census, but it's a very, very important thing. You know? So,
I think we should add here, we talked about health, we talked about police, but the census feeds into absolutely everything. It feeds into roads, it feeds into power supplies, it feeds into telephone lines, anything you can think of that the government might supply. If you're registered, it's going to help to get the money to come down here to fix all of that. If you don't register, it won't.
I think it's just going on your point about actually trying to put a finger on what the Thai population is. I know a couple of years ago we did some market research and trying to find the dynamics of finding what the population was. And one of the biggest impediments we saw certainly goes back to the Thai and bonds, goes back to there's so many workers from perhaps Isan and other places here. Certainly there's an element, certainly with this being a democratic area, you know, in terms of voting, certainly there's a willingness amongst the controlling party here to certainly keep the voting population down, because certainly that's the population which is from Phuket, and certainly in terms of that's going to be favorable to their party. So that was one of the biggest impediments we also found. Aside from taxation, which is a very valid question, whatever point as well, it was also in terms of voting rights. You know, once you're registered onto the Thai bond, you can essentially vote here in Phuket, you know, in local elections. So that was a big factor why people weren't registering as well.
Thank you, Bill. Next question, please.
Sorry, can I just add one other thing there?
Sure.
Thailand, like everywhere else in the world, has a very mobile population internally. And I mean, Bill's talking about people from Isan and so on. They don't stay here all year long. And they may be working on a construction site here one week, and next week they're in Krabi. How are we going to get them to register? It is a problem for the government. But the fact is that most of us in this room here are here most of the time. So it's our responsibility really to register.
Thank you. You have Charles with a question.
Just your thoughts, ideas in the last month. A development down in Caroline Kata, I think it's Kata Royal Condominium, something to that effect, had all its documentation, permits, papers, environmental impact review, the whole go-ahead for building this thing. And then the local village elders, whoever was in charge, got together, threw a fit that it was going to block the view of their island, and the project got brought to a halt. What is your documentation worth if it's all legal and binding and gets thrown out the window? And what do you think would be a resolution to this thing?
I think certainly anybody who's lived in Thailand understands the art of compromise. You know, one thing we certainly know about here about projects who do go through the process, who go through the regulations, and, you know, at the end they do find this amount, you know, ultimately it is going to be, you know, some kind of compromise. I think one certainly thing, there is imperfection in the system. We know that in terms of how it's regulated. Certainly there are regulations here about zoning, about certain height restrictions, about a lot of things. The problem is it's discretionary going from place to place in the island. You know, whether you're in Rawai, whether you're in Phuket town, whether you're in Chernkale, certainly there's different authorities and how they apply these, you know, are many different models. And certainly that goes back to perhaps having a governing body on top, and how the arbitral or how some kind of other zoning body would actually address this. But, you know, during the Thaksin government, certainly there was a big push to decentralize the government, put things backwards to the various entities, and that's certainly an outcropping of that. So it's an imperfect system, but it goes back to anything else here. It's certainly a compromise solution that's going to be talked about. You know, there's no, you know, nothing's 100%. That's why you say house 50-50, right?
I think what I would add to that is that if you're planning to develop something, it's not just a question of getting all your paperwork in order. It's communication. Yes, you can go to the Obajor and all these people and get your bits of paper, but you've got to communicate with the local community. Because they're involved, they're stakeholders in the sense of this. And if you don't involve, then you're going to have problems further down the line. You won't. And we will see this again and again and again.
Okay. Next question, please, Danny. You read.
Attaboy, Clyde, attaboy. Question, comment. On registrations, I work with the American Embassy here in Phuket. We don't have the titles and the honoraries, but we do the similar task that you do. Today I was in the police station with an American who has not been on a passport legally here for the last 10 years plus. He was very relieved to be finally inside of a system that could give him care, although he's behind bars right now. They would eventually get him, instead of going to bars, he's behind bars. I think there's something about registration that drives people into some concern that is not just for Thai people, it's for all people. The American Embassy is always trying to ascertain how many foreigners, how many Americans are here. We simply don't know. After the tsunami, we ended up with over 20,000 names who are missing. We ended up with 26 deaths. The missing people were people who went to a 7-Eleven somewhere in Seattle to get a loaf of bread, ended up on a plane to Thailand, Chiang Mai, Phuket, all over the place. They've been missing. I think people have a difficult time registering. It's smart to register. All of us here as foreigners should register with your embassies. Be known to your embassies where you are. The question I was going to ask relates to registrations and why register and why not register. In your opinions, we know there's an economy here that is maybe what we call above the table, invisible, which is taxed, and taxed maybe fairly, and there's an economy here below the table. In your estimations, what percent of our economy here in Phuket would you place above the table, which where we derive our taxes that produce our schools, our electrical grid, our sidewalks, our sewage system, our water supply? What percent do you think is running above the table, and what percent do you think is running below the table, and what can affect the change to get more below the table to above the table? You don't have to put your name with the answer, by the way. It's okay.
Right, let's go to your first question, because that's quite easy to deal with. There are many foreigners in Phuket at the moment that have overstayed their visa, without doubt. It's not in its tens, it's probably in its hundreds. It is unfortunate, and one can get away with it for a long time. But the authorities will clamp down on it if they find the foreigners without proper visa, and they will act accordingly, which will lead to deportation. If no funds are available for deportation, then that person will end up at the Immigration Detention Centre in Bangkok, which, believe me, is probably the worst of any institution in the whole of Thailand. We just don't want to be there even overnight. So it's important that everybody, makes themselves legal. And if they're not able to make themselves legal, they're more than welcome to come and ask me for advice, and there's the best way to deal with the situation to leave the country. To leave the country, you will need money. And it's as simple as that. The other question for me, Denny, is just a little bit too complicated to answer, especially in front of the press.